All right, today we're diving into a truly epic story. It's about a small kingdom, kind of on the fringes of the Greek world, that in the span of just one lifetime rose up to conquer pretty much the entire known world. And then, almost as fast, it all came crashing down and it was conquered itself. This is the incredible roller coaster history of ancient Macedonia. So, we're going to break this whole saga down into 6 acts. We'll start at the very beginning with their mythical origins, see how Philip II forged them into a superpower, and then, of course, ride along with Alexander's world-changing conquests. After that, we'll watch the empire tear itself apart and see how it struggled through a long decline that ended in one final epic clash with Rome. For most of its early history, Macedonia was not a big deal. It was a minor kingdom, and to its more civilized neighbors down south, like Athens and Sparta, it was seen as a bit of a backwater, a land of tough, semi-barbaric people on the edge of the map.
So how do you fight that kind of barbarian reputation? Well, the Macedonian kings had a pretty brilliant answer. Their ruling family, the Argeo dynasty, claimed they were direct descendants of the one and only Greek hero, Heracles. Now, this was way more than just a cool family tree. It was a huge political statement. It was them saying, we're not outsiders, we are Greek, and we have a divine right to be here and to rule.
And when you look at their early history, you can see just how shaky things were. They were a small fish in a very big, very dangerous pond. For about 30 years, they were actually a vassal state, basically a puppet to the colossal Persian Empire. And even after the Greeks managed to kick the Persians out, Macedonia had to play this constant, dangerous game of switching sides during the huge war between Athens and Sparta, really just to survive.
And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it did. The start of the 4th century BC was an absolute train wreck for Macedonia. They got hammered by brutal invasions, their kings kept getting assassinated, and the whole kingdom was being torn apart by rivals fighting for the throne. Honestly, it looked like Macedonia was about to be wiped off the map for good.
But it's right out of that chaos that the man who would change everything emerges. Philip II. So this next part, Act 2, is all about him. He is the true architect of Macedonian power. He didn't just save his kingdom, he completely rebuilt it from the ground up. And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How on earth does a failing state, totally surrounded by enemies, manage to turn everything around and become the master of all of Greece in just 20 years? The answer is a complete top-to-bottom revolution. Philip's plan was a 4-part masterclass. First, he was a genius at diplomacy, using bribes and strategic marriages to turn his enemies against each other. Second, he went for the money, seizing gold-rich regions to fund his vision. And third and fourth, he totally reinvented the army. He took the old Greek phalanx and gave his soldiers the sarissa, this monstrous 18-foot-long spear that just devastated enemy formations. Then he perfected combined arms, getting his unstoppable infantry and his elite cavalry to work together like a single, lethal machine. This wasn't just a new army, it was a new way of waging war. And boy, did this new machine work. Over a single generation, Philip just systematically took apart all his rivals. He crushed powerful Greek leagues, gobbled up strategic territory, and pushed his borders ever eastward. The final nail in the coffin for Greek independence came in 338 BC at the Battle of Chaeronea, where he absolutely smashed a combined army from Athens and Thebes. After that, he created the League of Corinth, uniting all of Greece except for stubborn Sparta, and announced his ultimate plan, a full-scale invasion of the Persian Empire. But here's the crazy twist. In 336 BC, right on the verge of launching this massive campaign, Philip was cut down, assassinated by his own bodyguard. The plan was ready, the army was ready, but the architect was dead. The fate of this entire grand project and the future of the world suddenly fell onto the shoulders of his 20-year-old son, a kid named Alexander. And that, of course, brings us to Act 3, and to maybe the most famous name in all of ancient history, Alexander the Great. He took his father's incredible army and his father's ambitious plan, and then he just unleashed it on the world with a speed and ferocity that frankly has never been seen before or since. I mean, just look at this timeline. The pace is absolutely insane. In just a little over a decade, he locked down Greece, conquered all of Asia Minor, shattered the main Persian armies, took Egypt without a fight, and marched his men all the way to India. He never ever lost a single battle. And then, at the absolute peak of his power, in Babylon, he suddenly got sick and died. He was just 32 years old.
So who was this guy really? Well, as a general, he was flawless, an absolute genius, famous for personally leading his cavalry charges right into the thick of it. But as a king, well, he was a lot more complicated. He started to believe he was a living god, and with that came this intense paranoia. He executed some of his most trusted, lifelong advisors. He even started to alienate his own loyal Macedonian soldiers by trying to make them perform Persian court rituals, like bowing down before him.
So Alexander conquers the world, and then dies. No heir, no designated successor, no plan. What happens next? Absolute chaos. This begins our fourth act, the total collapse, an era of brutal, backstabbing civil war that we call the Wars of the Diadochi, which literally means the successors, as Alexander's top generals fought over the pieces of his empire. And right away, the empire just shatters. His generals, these men who had been like brothers, became mortal enemies overnight. They just carved up the world for themselves. You had Ptolemy grabbing the incredible wealth of Egypt, Seleucus taking the vast eastern heartland, and eventually a ruthless general named Cassander taking control of the Macedonian homeland itself. And this period was just unbelievably bloody. The generals didn't just fight each other, they went on a systematic campaign to exterminate Alexander's entire family to secure their own power. Alexander's own mother, Olympias, had his half-brother executed. Then she was captured and executed. And then Cassander had Alexander's young son and his wife murdered in secret. Think about that. Within 15 years of Alexander's death, not a single person with his blood in their veins was left alive. Okay, so in our fifth act, we see what finally rises from the ashes of all that bloodshed. After decades of war, a new dynasty, the Antigonids, finally manages to lock down control of Macedonia. But this was not Alexander's empire anymore, not even close. It was a smaller, battered kingdom, constantly fighting just to hold on to its old power over Greece. And the threats just never stopped. They were coming from literally every direction. You had devastating invasions from Gallic tribes out of the north. You had endless wars against the other successor kingdoms, the Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids in the east. And right at home, powerful new leagues of Greek city-states were rising up, constantly challenging Macedonian rule. It was a kingdom under permanent siege. But you've got to give it to them. For over a century, the Antigonids held on. Through just sheer determination and military skill, they kept Macedonia as the top dog in Greece. But as the world ticked over into the 2nd century BC, a shadow started to fall from the west. A new power was on the rise, one with terrifying discipline, endless ambition, and an army of legions. Rome was coming. And this brings us to the final, tragic act of Macedonia's story. This was the ultimate showdown, an inevitable collision between the old master of the Greek world and the new superpower of the Mediterranean, the Roman Republic. You can see right here why this conflict was basically unavoidable. You have Macedonia under King Philip V trying to restore its old glory and dominance. And you have Rome, fresh off of beating its rival Carthage, now looking to project its power into the Greek world. Their ambitions were on a direct collision course. And when Philip made the disastrous decision to ally with Rome's greatest enemy, Hannibal, war was guaranteed. The end didn't come in a single blow, but through a slow, grinding beatdown over 4 separate wars. The first one was basically a draw, but in the second, the Roman legions proved their superiority, crushing the Macedonian phalanx. In the third war, after another defeat, Rome just abolished the Macedonian monarchy entirely. And finally, in the fourth war, a last desperate Macedonian rebellion was stamped out for good. And that was it. In 148 BC, the Kingdom of Macedonia officially ceased to exist. The land that had produced Philip and Alexander, that had dominated its world for 2 centuries, was formally annexed and became just another province in Rome's growing empire. After almost 600 years, its story was over. So the kingdom itself was gone, dismantled by the Romans. But that leaves us with one final, fascinating question about its legacy. The physical kingdom was conquered, yes, but what about the culture that Alexander had spread all over the world? This blended Greek and Eastern culture that we call Hellenism. Did that idea, in a way, end up conquering its conquerors? Did it shape the Roman world so profoundly that through them it ended up shaping the future of all of Western civilization? That right there is the lasting power of Macedonia's story.